Hello everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Let's address the elephant in the room first off, and I have got myself a little microphone, decided to go pro now that I am really enjoying putting out YouTube videos on a regular basis. As you can probably tell from the backdrop, this is my front door in Bali. It's beautifully detailed in red and gold. I came back from Vietnam a couple of days ago and absolutely loving being back in my little house. So without further ado, I wanted to film my January wrap-up. My laptop's just over to the side here, this way, so if I look over, that's why. I wanted to start off by mentioning some brief stats. I read 25% translated lit this month, which I'm very pleased with, and then I read 38% new to me authors and 38% male authors, which I'm starting to track this year just because I noticed in 2022 I read overwhelmingly female authors, which is fair enough. I undoubtedly resonate more with their stance, the topics that they talk about, and so, but when comparing that with, say, my top 10 books of 2022, where 30–40% were by male authors, I thought, well, let's try and get that number up from maybe 80–20 female to male to maybe 30–70 or 40–60, just to get it a little bit higher, because clearly when I do read books by male authors, I get on with them more. So let's even up that gender balance and just watch each month where the statistics are with that. So I thought I'd go through in order. So the first book I read of the year was Lapvona by Atessa Molsveg, and this was a highly anticipated release for me. Atessa Molsveg in the past has been a bit of a Marmite author. 2 of her books I've now rated 5 stars and 2 I've rated 2 stars. So she either hits or she misses for me, which is unusual. Normally when I like an author, I like the majority of their work, so this was a real treat. I love a piece of historical fiction, and this was historical fiction, fast paced. It's about 300 pages, but you're almost propelled through the narrative because there is a change constantly in what's going on. There was plenty of plot twists. The chapters were easily digestible and it was just so readable. The twists also kept you going, so it's really difficult to talk about without giving spoilers because there's so much that happens, but I loved it, and this is the best book of the month for me. So moving on to the second book I read, which was True Biz, which was very special because it is about deaf children and a deaf school, and growing up in a high school, my best friend was hard of hearing, and so it brought back lots of wonderful memories of growing up with her and going through high school with her. High school is already littered with coming of age issues. Throw in her having to deal with mainstream schooling whilst being hard of hearing. She was a wonderful friend and I have very fond memories, and we're still friends to this day. I have very fond memories of going through school with her. So anyway, back to the book. So it resonated very strongly with me, but in terms of the book itself, we flip between 3 different perspectives, and all of them are fantastic, and it's really lovely, the small touches in the book. So each chapter, when we change perspectives, the sign for that character's first initial is given, so rather than chapter numbers you have the sign. So as well as that, at the end of every chapter there's either some sort of historical context for what was happening at the time around kind of deaf legislation, so usually laws being put in place to make life especially difficult for deaf people or deaf children, or funding being reduced, and the school in question in the book is actually under threat from being closed down because it's because of the resources that it takes to fund. So as well as not only there being some historical facts about sign language and the history of sign language and how it originated, but also how to perform certain signs. And I found that just as that non-fiction content just as engaging as the plot itself. So it was really, really wonderful, and it was runner-up for this month's best book. So definitely a wonderful second place. Then the next book I read was Space Invaders by Nona Fernandez. This is a translated piece of fiction, and I read her first book, which was The Twilight Zone, and absolutely loved it. Nona Fernandez really loves 1980s. Well, maybe she doesn't love it, but she likes certainly writing about 1980s Chile under the Pinochet dictatorship, because that is the source of both of her novels to date. This one is incredibly short. It's 88 pages, and I feel like that's kind of what let it down for me. I loved it. I was totally in, but I felt like it could have been 200 pages longer. If it had been the same length as Twilight Zone, her previous novel, which was about 250-ish pages, I feel like I would have had more to sink my teeth into, but it just seemed to be over and started and finished in a heartbeat. And so my only criticism of it is its length. But at the same time, maybe that was Fernandez's wish, because Space Invaders, it's ethereal, it's dreamlike, I guess, given the subject matter, more nightmarish than dreamlike. So I can understand potentially why it's the length it is, but this is a really interesting historical political narrative, and it's Nona Fernandez, so the writing is absolutely brilliant. The next book I read was called The Mating Habits of Stags, and I read this because this is a backlist title. It was once nominated for the Portico Prize. It didn't win, but I believe it was shortlisted, and so having really loved fiction coming out of the north of England before, I wanted to give this one a go, and I really enjoyed this one. The first 2/3 is narrated from the perspective of an old man called Jake, who is on the run through the kind of northeast countryside, having just killed another old man in a care home. And we're like, right, okay, there's a mystery element throughout the first 2/3 of why this killing has happened. And then I must admit, the final third is we switch narration to a woman who was a love interest of Jake, and I didn't quite understand why we'd moved perspective. So that's what let this down for me. This was a 4.5 star read until we got to that final third, where I kind of didn't understand why we'd shifted perspective, and so I eventually rated it 3.5 stars because of that. It was the nature writing was fantastic. I really felt like I was there, and we slowly find out why Jake murdered this man. So yes, it started out great, and then unfortunately it sort of let itself down with the ending. The next book I read was Benjamin Myers's Beastings. This won, I believe, the Portico Prize, and I read his novel, what was it called? The Offing, in November last year, and absolutely loved it. Beautiful descriptions of northeast England and an unlikely friendship between a young man and an older woman and her dog, and so actually it made my top 10 books of 2022, so I knew I was going to like this one. There is a young woman with her baby fleeing from a sort of poacher and a priest who are trying to capture her. The priest is the one who's trying to capture her because he has done kind of unspeakable things to her as she was a child growing up in a nunnery. And so the priest sort of asked the poacher to come and join him because as the woman is fleeing across the countryside, who better to employ to kind of navigate this wilderness than the local poacher, because the priest, didn't know where he's going, didn't know the first clue about where to try and find her. So this whole novel is basically the hunt for this woman, and we flip perspectives, which I love. I love a dual perspective novel. We're flipping between the priest's perspective and the woman on the run's perspective, and that just builds the pace, the suspense, the momentum, this cat and mouse game that's going on, and you're really rooting for the woman. And this, more than any other book this month, had an ending that I will never forget. The ending is just seared into my brain. With books like Lapvona, I couldn't really tell you how it ended. It sort of ended with like a little kind of anticlimactic end. But this one, I will remember the book and I will remember the ending. It is a shocker. Next, I read Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier. I loved two of Daphne du Maurier's books last year. I actually only discovered Daphne du Maurier last year. And Jamaica Inn reminded me quite a bit of Frenchman's Creek, which I think made my top 10 of 2022. And it reminded me because of the setting. So we're in Cornwall. We're at a kind of lodging house, an inn, and there is news travelling through the villages that there are smugglers. And so this young woman turns up to her aunt's house because her mum has just died, and her aunt has a husband, and he, we quickly learn, is involved in this smuggling trade. So it's all very sordid and underhand and dark, and she's not allowed to pry into what the mysterious happenings that are happening around the place, and random men who are turning up in the night with horse and carts and all this sort of thing. And it gradually gets darker and darker, but unfortunately there wasn't enough content for me to justify its length. So whilst Frenchman's Creek I feel was very action-packed and fast-paced, and I really loved it, I feel like this one was sort of like a poor man's version of that. I finished it and I gave it 3 stars because it was enjoyable, and the writing was obviously great because I really enjoy Daphne du Maurier's writing, but I just feel like it just didn't have enough content to sustain my attention, and it wasn't as dynamic as I felt Frenchman's Creek was. So the final book I read in January was another translated piece of fiction by Olivier Guyez. Hope I'm saying that correctly. And this is called The Disappearance of Joseph Mengele, otherwise known as the Angel of Death, in the Auschwitz concentration camps. This is about his life after the collapse of Auschwitz, and we follow Mengele after he has fled to South America along with another number of prominent Nazis, and he is basically solitary on his own, on the run, and leads a very paranoid, lonely existence really for the remainder of his life, as he hears about Mossad basically capturing other Nazis, bringing them back to Israel, and basically having them shot up against a wall by firing squad. And so he's hearing all about this and thinking, gosh, like around every corner there could be somebody trying to catch me. So he ends up in the middle of the jungle somewhere, and dies alone and in exile, having never been captured, never been brought to justice for his crimes, but certainly living no kind of life that anybody would want to live. Sounds his son comes out to visit him, and his son despises him, and the visit goes terribly. So it's a really kind of not pleasant book, but it's certainly fast-paced and interesting. I had no idea what had happened to a lot of the Nazis. I knew that a lot of them had been taken in and given refuge by Argentina, and I knew that there were some attempts to capture them, not huge amounts, I must admit, and to bring them to trial, but I know that a lot of them, like Mengele, died without justice being served. So yes, for me certainly as a historian, and having studied a lot about World War II and Nazi Germany, this was especially interesting to hear kind of life after Nazi Germany and life after World War II for these Nazis. So that brings me to the end of the books I read this month. I will put up again the two kind of, I'm not sure what to call them, images that I'm tracking my favourite books of the year on, and I will add this in at the end of every month, and yes, I think that'll be a nice addition. And these templates I got from Books with Buzzy, and if anyone is following Russell from Ink and Paper blog, he also uses these templates. I absolutely love his channel. His little jingle that he has at the beginning of all of his videos just brings me so much joy. I sort of like sing along to them every time. And yes, if you're not following Russell, go and watch his videos. I thoroughly recommend. And I shall see you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching, and I will, my next video I think will be up in a couple of days, so see you then. Bye!